The Trump political revenge tour is now in full swing. It's like the Taylor Swift Eras tour, but with a little more makeup and a whole lot more destruction of the rule of law. First up, Virginia. Why Virginia? Well, back in 2024, up in the great state of New York, State Attorney General Letitia James had the nerve to win a civil conviction in a court of law against citizen Trump for doing a bunch of real estate fraud. Then, in September of 2025, President Trump demanded that Eric Siebert, the senior U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, criminally indict Letitia James of New York for doing a bunch of real estate fraud. Siebert investigated Letitia James and found no crime, and so the president told Eric Siebert, "You're fired," which is bad enough because Eric Siebert is a highly competent prosecutor beloved by both Republicans and Democrats. He was uniquely qualified to run one of the most important U.S. attorney's offices in the country, where America prosecutes foreign spies and corrupt defense contractors. So who's on deck to replace him? Lindsay Halligan, a Florida insurance lawyer who has never prosecuted a case in her life and isn't even licensed to practice law in the state of Virginia, but she sure loves Trump and Pam Bondi. So let's examine the legality of blatantly weaponizing the DOJ, talk about what happens next, and see if we can predict where the Trump political revenge tour is heading next. Psst, it's Maryland, where I live. All 94 federal districts are important, of course, but some are more important than others. The Southern District of New York, which includes Manhattan, is a huge office with a deep bench of white-collar prosecutors. The U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia is the venue for cases we talk about on this channel every single week because it encompasses the nation's capital. The Eastern District of Virginia is less sexy, but it's still really important. You've got the Pentagon, the CIA headquarters, and the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office there. A ton of national security cases are prosecuted in EDVA. The court also has a very specific culture. Judges there move cases along at a rapid clip. And in fact, that's why they call it the rocket docket, because it moves so much faster than most federal courts. This is not a place that tolerates unprofessionalism or showboating, all of which is to say, you cannot have a political hack as the top prosecutor in the Eastern District of Virginia. It's got to be someone competent. And until September 19th, that's exactly what they had. Eric Siebert spent the past 15 years working his way up through the ranks at EDVA. Before that, he was a cop in Washington, D.C., and he went to a prestigious law school, he clerked for a federal judge, he started as a line prosecutor and got promoted to positions of increasing responsibility. And so, in short, he has exactly the resume you'd expect for someone in this high-profile position. TLDR, he did the work. So when Trump took office on January 20th, the incumbent U.S. attorney for the EDVA, that's Jessica Aber, resigned because she was Biden's person. Virginia's Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin recommended Siebert as her replacement. Trump named him as the interim U.S. attorney the next day. That interim appointment could only last for 120 days, but under 28 U.S.C. Section 546, the federal judges in the district can choose someone to fill the position of U.S. attorney if the office becomes vacant. And that's what happened. Siebert was really good at his job, and so on May 9th, the EDVA judges unanimously appointed him to serve as U.S. attorney. Now, normally, a U.S. attorney has to be Senate confirmed, but under Section 546, once he was appointed by the judges, Siebert could have stayed in the position indefinitely. And that would have been okay with more or less everyone in Virginia. Siebert has strong ties to the state Republican Party. His father-in-law, Richard Cullen, served as both state attorney general and the U.S. attorney in EDVA. Cullen is currently counsel to Governor Youngkin, who recommended Siebert in the first place. And Siebert has the support of the state's two Democratic senators, Tim Kaine and Mark Warner. And so, on May 6, President Trump nominated Siebert to hold the position permanently. And that was kind of a gimme for Trump. The Constitution says that the president can appoint principal officers with the advice and consent of the Senate, and that includes U.S. attorneys. But Senate confirmation takes a lot of time and political energy. Also, the Senate has what's known as the blue slip rule, which allows home state senators to effectively veto the nomination of judges and prosecutors in their backyard. So for 100 years, if both senators from a state didn't return this piece of paper blessing a nomination, a literal blue slip, then it did not go through. And Republican Senator Chuck Grassley, the spry 92-year-old chair of the Judiciary Committee, is not giving this up. He says it prevents one party from jamming through nominees who don't align with the values of the communities they would serve and ensures home state senators retain a say on behalf of their constituents. Siebert is a Republican who's supported by the Republican governor and also Virginia's two Democratic senators. Plus, he got the nods from the district judges, so he could keep working without worrying about timing out after 120 days. Total layup. Until This guy stuck his nose in and made a mess of it all. Bill Pulte is director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency and chairman of both the Federal National Mortgage Association and the Federal Home Loan Mortgage Corporation, known to generations of home buyers as Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Pulte's jobs give him access to information on every federally backed mortgage, and so he took Trump's enemies list and combed through all of their financial paperwork going back decades looking for some kind of crime to charge them with. Now, that would be a gross abuse in and of itself. The government's database of financial documents is supposed to be confidential. There was no probable cause to believe that these people had done anything wrong. In fact, one of the scandals that brought down Richard Nixon was the revelation that he directed the IRS to audit his enemies. The president targeting his enemies used to be an impeachable offense, but even if Pulte had found evidence of crime in a totally legitimate way, the normal course of business would have been to quietly refer it to the Justice Department, but that's not what happened. Instead, Pulte's been blasting out allegations against Trump's political foes, spreading their personal financial information via Twitter and making conclusory statements about their guilt.
She said that she had a primary residence in Virginia. When she was the Attorney General of New York, she signed an affidavit. And on top of that, she had a second home, if you can believe that, in Virginia, that we believe is not her second home. So I believe this is riddled with mortgage fraud. And frankly, I think that's why she knew so much about the law in terms of how to go after President Trump. Was she was the fraudster, not President Trump.
I really don't have words to describe how inappropriate this is. For comparison, during the first Trump administration, Trump's personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, had some hinky financial transactions that got flagged by a confidential law enforcement database known as FinCEN. That was not Cohen being targeted. It was an algorithm picking up an anomaly and generating what's known as a suspicious activity report. The IRS employee who leaked those reports to the public got 5 years in jail. But Pulte is just posting that stuff on Maine, and now the president is demanding that prosecutors charge his enemies based on Pulte's unproven accusations. At the top of that enemies list is New York Attorney General Letitia James. She's the one who brought the civil fraud suit against him and his company, along with his oldest children. In 2023, a judge found that the company was liable for years of fraud and ordered it to pay a $354 million fine. The appeals court reduced that fine substantially, but Donald Trump is still pissed. So Pulte went through decades of James's finances looking for something to pin on her, and then he published this criminal referral letter that he sent to Attorney General Pam Bondi, accusing James of making material misrepresentations in her mortgage paperwork to gain a financial advantage. James's lawyer, Abby Lowell, responded in his own letter to Bondi, calling Pulte's claims 3 pages of stale, threadbare allegations as part of President Trump's revenge tour against Attorney General James. It is not cool when people go snooping through your personal data, and that highlights why it's so important to remove your online personal data. Data brokers vacuum up your personal data from all corners of the internet and sell it to anyone who wants to buy it, but you can fight back by signing up for today's sponsor, Incogni. Incogni removes your personal data from online data brokers by searching the internet, reaching out directly on your behalf, and forcing them to take your personal info down. If those data brokers resist, Incogni will take care of that too, because Incogni fights back. These data brokers are the reason why in the US you can search your name and find a bunch of websites that will give anyone your home address, phone number, and extensive history. It is shocking just how easy it is to find all this information. It also might be why you're getting so many spam calls lately or even had your identity stolen. I've been using Incogni for years. In that time, you can see I've been on hundreds of lists, some of which had a high sensitivity score, meaning the broker had tons of data on me. Luckily, Incogni has completed hundreds of data takedowns for me over the years. I could never do this myself, so thank you to Incogni for weeks of work and adding me to over 40 suppression lists. And Incogni will continue to conduct ongoing removals because even if the broker removes your data once, they can collect it and publish it again. So if online privacy is important to you, give Incogni a try. If you click on the link on screen or down below, you can try Incogni risk-free for 30 days with a 60% off discount and get a full refund if you're not into it. And if you keep it, you'll still get the exclusive 60% discount so long as you use our link or the code LegalEagle, all one word. So sign up for Incogni or I will see you in court. Bill Pulte's referral letter for Tish James first landed on the desk of Ed Martin, the MAGA lawyer who was so embarrassingly incompetent that Senate Republicans refused to confirm him as U.S. Attorney for D.C. We made a whole video about that guy. After that debacle, Martin was shunted to the Justice Department and given a bunch of titles to soothe his wounded pride. He's an Associate Deputy Attorney General, Chief Pardon Lawyer, and head of the Weaponization Working Group, tasked with proving that President Biden targeted Trump and his allies. Martin immediately sent James a letter suggesting that AG James would best serve the good of the state and the nation by resigning from office and promising to take this as an act of good faith. He also showed up outside her house wearing a 1940s film noir-style hard-boiled detective trench coat, gumshoeing the trail of crime, you see. I'm not even kidding. This weirdo actually posted the pictures to social media. Normal prosecutors don't stalk their investigative targets on social media in cosplay, but in fairness, Ed Martin never prosecuted a case in his life before Trump gave him all those jobs in the Justice Department, so maybe not such a big surprise that he's been unable to find anything to pin on James or anyone else. Honestly, I'm not sure that guy could find his way out of the men's room at the DOJ without an aide to hold his hand and walk him out. But Eric Siebert is an experienced prosecutor, and he couldn't find anything to charge James with either. That's because most of what Pulte flagged amounts to ticking the wrong box on a long form. For instance, James wanted to help her niece buy a house in Norfolk, Virginia, so she agreed to co-sign the mortgage and she executed a power of attorney to allow the niece to sign all the paperwork at closing. That POA wrongly stated that the property would be James's principal residence, that is, where she lived. But mortgage fraud has an intent requirement. You can't just do it accidentally. And here, the actual mortgage application said over and over again that the property was not James's primary residence. When Eric Siebert got the referral from Attorney General Pam Bondi, he took the thing to a grand jury and did his best to run it to ground. ABC reports that the U.S. Attorney's Office and EDVA interviewed 15 witnesses, including insurers, loan officers, underwriters, realtors, and James's niece. The underwriter said she didn't look at the POA at all, and why would she? It's a power of attorney to allow someone to sign documents, not a statement of finance. And the title lawyers testified that they're the ones who prepared the POA, and they just didn't correct the boilerplate template that said primary residence. Obviously, there's no intent to deceive and no fraud, which is why there was no indictment. According to the Washington Post, Siebert, his staff, and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche's office agreed that there was not sufficient evidence to seek an indictment of James over the home purchase. Siebert also tried his best to make a real case against former FBI Director James Comey, whom Trump fired in his first term over the Russia investigation. Trump and his allies have been trying to indict Comey for years because they say he lied to Congress in September of 2020 about leaking classified information. The New York Times reports that Siebert subpoenaed witnesses in September and concluded that he could not charge Comey with perjury. He also declined to arrest Comey for making terroristic threats because Comey tweeted a picture of seashells at the beach that someone had arranged to say 8647. Tulsi Gabbard, the actual director of national intelligence, insists that this was a secret message to 86, the 47th president.
Posting something that is a call to get rid of our president, the 47th president of the United States, Donald Trump.
Okay. So Siebert, the IRL prosecutor with 15 years of experience, said there was no there, not for Tish James and not for James Comey. But that did not sit well with the president, who told reporters on Friday, September 19th, that he wanted Siebert out because Virginia's Democratic Senators Tim Kaine and Mark Warner like him too much.
When I saw that he got two senators, two gentlemen that are bad news as far as I'm concerned, when I saw that he got approved by those two men, I said, pull it, because he can't be any good.
According to the Post, Siebert resigned as U.S. attorney moments after President Donald Trump told reporters in the Oval Office, I want him out. But Siebert's resignation infuriated the president, who rage posted after midnight that he had withdrawn Siebert's nomination when I was informed that he received the unusually strong support of the two absolutely terrible sleazebag Democrat senators from the great state of Virginia. He didn't quit, I fired him. So if Kaine and Warner had been only tepidly supportive, it would have been okay, but a big thumbs up is the mark of the beast. Okay. What happened next is not entirely clear. Attorney General Pam Bondi named Republican prosecutor Maggie Cleary to run the office in EDVA, and Cleary did sign at least one pleading as acting U.S. attorney. But then Trump tapped out a series of posts yelling at Bondi for failing to indict his enemies. He said, Pam, I have reviewed over 30 statements and posts saying that essentially same old story as last time. All talk, no action. Nothing is being done. What about Comey, Adam Shifty Schiff, Letitia? They're all guilty as hell, but nothing is going to be done. Statements? Like on social media? What statements? Trump called Siebert a woke rhino who was never going to do his job. He insisted that he had a great case, and many lawyers and legal pundits say so. Again, no legal pundits were named here. But then he said something even weirder. He said, Lindsay Halligan is a really good lawyer and likes you a lot. We can't delay any longer. It's killing our reputation and credibility. They impeached me twice and indicted me 5 times over nothing. Justice must be served now. The President of the United States is explicitly demanding that the Attorney General indict his enemies as payback because Congress impeached him and he was criminally indicted. That's crazy. Also, Lindsay who? Until 2022, Lindsay Halligan was an insurance defense lawyer working in Fort Lauderdale. She had 0 prosecutorial experience. She had 0 criminal law experience. Her biggest courtroom win involved serving as a second chair in a 2-day trial defending an insurer's refusal to pay out claims to Miami homeowners with damaged roofs. But she is very good on TV, which makes sense since she's a former beauty pageant contestant. Halligan was present at Mar-a-Lago when the FBI executed the search warrant there, and soon enough, she was in the middle of the action for all of Trump's legal woes, because Trump had a lot of lawyers that were willing to say a lot of outlandish stuff in court, but most of those lawyers were from D.C. or New York, and while Halligan had 0 criminal legal experience, she did have something all those other lawyers lacked. She had a Florida bar card, and there has to be at least one lawyer on the case admitted to practice in the jurisdiction, which is how Lindsay Halligan wound up on paper, at least, as the lead lawyer challenging the warrant in Trump's stolen documents case.
They looked at God knows what in there and did God knows what in there. We have no idea. What the FBI did was an appalling display of abuse of power.
That lawsuit, doomed as it was, succeeded in throwing sand in the gears after FBI agents found hundreds of classified documents stored in various locations at the president's private club. But eventually, the 11th Circuit curb-stomped Judge Eileen Cannon's wildly illegal review of the search warrant, and the prosecution moved forward. But not with Lindsay Halligan. When it was Trump's took us on the line, he got lawyers who knew their way around a courtroom. Trump's Political Action Committee coughed up $3 million to persuade former Florida Solicitor General Chris Kise to leave his fancy law firm job and represent Trump in the documents case. Halligan's services were no longer needed once Kise, a lawyer with actual criminal experience, entered his appearance. But Halligan never really left Trump's orbit. When he returned to D.C., she came with him and was made Assistant to the President for Domestic Policy and Special Assistant to the President and Senior Associate Staff Secretary. What is it with these people all having like 7 job titles? On March 5th, Trump put out an executive order tasking Halligan with de-wokeifying the Smithsonian so it quits promoting narratives that portray American and Western values as inherently harmful and oppressive. Halligan has an undergraduate degree in politics and no background as a historian, but she told the Washington Post that her visits to the museum left her feeling dismayed with the lack of focus on the ways America is so special. So I guess she figured she was up to the job. And although she has virtually no criminal legal experience, she thinks she is also qualified to run one of the busiest U.S. attorneys' offices in the country. On Monday, September 22nd, Halligan was sworn in as interim U.S. attorney in EDVA. Someone who has never prosecuted a case in her life is now riding the rocket docket. In Trump's Florida case, Halligan was at least qualified to be local counsel. All that required was a Florida bar card. But Halligan isn't even a member of the bar in Virginia. That's ridiculous. And the fact that Bondi demoted Maggie Cleary to serve as Halligan's top deputy, read, do all the real work, does not change the fact that this is an expression of pure contempt for the people who spent their whole lives working to develop the legal chops to run an office like EDVA. Lawyers are not like widgets. You can't just swap out one for the other. And I say this as someone who will admit to being absolutely unqualified to run a U.S. attorney's office. But I guess we're going to find out soon just exactly how corrupt Halligan intends to be. As Benjamin Wittes of Lawfare points out, if the DOJ wants to charge James Comey with perjury, the statute of limitations is about to expire in just a few days. But corruption aside, Halligan's going to run into another problem in a little less than 120 days when her appointment expires under Section 546, because the president says he intends to nominate her for a full term. But come January 20th, Halligan's going to be out of a job unless the Senate confirms her before that. And that seems highly unlikely for a whole host of reasons. First, the Senate moves very slowly. As of this recording, it has confirmed exactly 2 of the president's nominees for U.S. attorney. And second, there is no way Senators Kaine and Warner are going to return those blue slips. And if the home state senators don't sign off on a U.S. attorney nominee, that nominee doesn't move. And By the way, Trump and Grassley have been sniping at each other about blue slips for months. In July, the president screamed at Grassley on social media to end this probably unconstitutional custom and not let the Democrats laugh at him and the Republican Party for being weak and ineffective. Grassley shot back that a U.S. attorney/district judge nominee without a blue slip does not have the votes to get confirmed on the Senate floor, and they don't have the votes to get out of committee. As chairman, I set Pres Trump noms up for success, not failure. Incidentally, Grassley always tweets like that. Here's the post informing his constituents that he and his aide hit a deer with their Prius. Assume deer dead. And assume nomination dead if Halligan cannot get those blue slips. Now, we've already seen this play out in New Jersey to disastrous effect. There, Trump tried to put yet another of his personal lawyers in charge of a U.S. attorney's office. Like Halligan, Alina Habba had zero prosecutorial experience and nothing on her resume that would make her an appropriate candidate to be U.S. attorney for New Jersey. And like Halligan, Trump put Habba in on an interim 120-day appointment and simultaneously forwarded her nomination to the Senate for confirmation. But he didn't forward it particularly hard. Habba seems to have barely bothered with the vetting paperwork, and that's because there was no way on earth that New Jersey's Democratic senators were going to return their blue slips for Habba. And so, when her term expired, the judges in the District of New Jersey nominated Habba's deputy, a highly competent career prosecutor named Desiree Grace. Attorney General Pam Bondi was big mad at the judge's defiance, so she appointed Habba as the first deputy, fired Grace, and then declared Habba the acting U.S. attorney under the Federal Vacancies Reform Act. Of course, if Halligan's mission is simply to secure a couple of corrupt indictments against Tish James and James Comey, she may only need 4 months. Then she can go back to harassing the Smithsonian for saying that slavery was bad or whatever. And you know what? I don't want to be glib about this. This is massive corruption that would have gotten the president impeached in any other era. The fact that Congress doesn't care at all is a disaster for the rule of law. And once this level of degradation becomes normal, it doesn't stop. In Maryland, U.S. Attorney Kelly Hayes was tapped by Bondi to lead the office in February. She's a career prosecutor, and when she timed out under the 120-day limit, the judges in the District Court of Maryland appointed her under Section 546. So she can stay there forever without Senate confirmation. But Bill Pulte sent one of his referral letters to the DOJ about California Senator Adam Schiff, whom he says committed mortgage fraud with respect to a house that he owns in Maryland. Schiff was one of the lead congressional investigators into the Trump 2016 campaign's ties to Russian election interference. And Schiff served on the January 6th committee, which means that Hayes is under huge pressure from the White House to indict Schiff, despite the fact that her office hasn't found anything to charge him with. Multiple media outlets are reporting that Hayes fears she's about to be fired too. God only knows which third-string Trump lawyer they'll put in charge of the U.S. Attorney's Office in Maryland if that happens. How many more prosecutors' offices is Trump going to break while trying to get someone to dummy up indictments of his enemies? It's a Saturday night massacre every Saturday for the next 3+ years. Thanks, Chief Justice Roberts.
Now, all this highlights why it's so important to get a great lawyer when you're dealing with your own case. Now, after I started this channel, every week I'd get hundreds of comments and emails from viewers who are dealing with legal problems. And they'd ask, can you help me find a lawyer? Or how do I know if this attorney is any good? And there's a massive gap in our justice system. It's that people don't know how to find the right lawyer for their specific situation. They're scared, they're overwhelmed, and they end up doing nothing or hiring the first attorney who calls them back. And that really bothered me. So I started to wonder, what if there was a different way? What if we could build a law firm that actually lived up to the values that I talk about on this channel: transparency, accessibility, and putting clients first instead of chasing billable hours. A firm where you don't need to pay anything up front and your lawyers only get paid if you do, to maximize your opportunity for justice. So a few years ago, I decided to fix that problem. I decided to start my own personal injury law firm. And honestly, it wasn't an easy choice. But I realized I was in this unique position. I had this platform, this community, and the experience. Not to get rich, trust me, there are easier ways to make money than starting a law practice. But we did it because access to justice shouldn't be a luxury. Because finding the right legal representation shouldn't feel like playing Russian roulette with your future. And when you work with my firm, you're not just getting a lawyer. You're getting a team that understands that behind every case is a real person with real stakes. If we can't represent you, or you're in a state where we don't practice, we'll take the time to try to match you with an attorney in my personal network of lawyers. A national network of some of the best lawyers in the country who actually specialize in what you're going through, located right where you are, not just whoever happens to be available. So if you're dealing with a personal injury, a car crash, a data breach, sexual harassment, a Social Security or workers' comp issue, give us a call at the the number on screen or click on the link below. Now, I can't represent everyone that watches this channel. I wish I could, but what I can do is make sure that when you need legal help, you have somewhere to turn to that you can trust. So whether it's me handling your case or the incredible attorneys we partnered with, you'll get the same principles of honesty and education that we bring to every video. And if you're dealing with a legal issue and you're not sure where to start, check out the link in the description. Let's have a conversation about how we can help you find not just a lawyer, but the right lawyer for your situation. Because at the end of the day, that's what this is all about, making sure that when life gets complicated, you don't have to face it alone. Which is why when you need a lawyer, you don't just need a legal team, you need the Eagle team.